Hello, so thanks for coming this evening. Really appreciate you making it down. I don't know if it's your, is it your first time in this exhibition this evening? Yeah. So about half, no, maybe more than half actually, like 3/4 of the people, first time, okay. And you spent some time having a look and kind of exploring the show, yeah? Okay, good. So what I wanted to do this evening was kind of work in a sort of generative way. So rather than just reel off lots of kind of information that I've kind of directed and, you know, organized in a way to give you a very specific kind of journey through the ideas, some of the ideas that are in here, or just general ideas. I thought it'd be maybe more interesting if we worked in a bit more of a generative way. So I don't know where this is going to go. I don't know what we're going to discuss, and how long it goes on for, and what it is or what it becomes is very much down to everybody here as much as it is for me, which I think in some ways is kind of quite in keeping with the kind of ethos, I suppose, behind the actual exhibition itself and what I do as a whole. So is that okay with everybody? Yeah? Is everyone good with that? Yeah? All right. So I guess I'd like to ask you what you'd like to know, first of all. Is there anything anyone would like to know?
So you know the chevron work?
Yes.
And you changed, the orange is the same, but the green is different. How did you choose that colour of green?
Well, so different from what?
From the normal, like, orange and yellow high-vis sort of chevron.
Right, yeah.
And then you've kept the orange, but the green is
different. Yeah, it's so interesting. I've never once thought of it in that way, in the sense of course, it's so, you know, for reference, I guess for people who maybe haven't actually seen the show or whatever, there's a piece made from kind of 2 panels of high-vis tape, which is kind of echoing what you find on the back of ambulances, you know, in general here in the UK. And quite, yeah, correctly, one of them is these, out of these 2 square panels, one of them is using a kind of standard colorway, another one uses a green instead of the yellow.
Yeah, green is much more aesthetically pleasing.
Is it?
In a way. It's less, I mean, the point of high-vis is like, it's meant to be annoying in a way, but the green is kind of has a quality to it.
I mean, that's really interesting. I suppose like the word annoying is really good because I suppose coming from that is the idea of a kind of an irritation of some kind or something that doesn't fit, whatever. I remember one time someone telling me about, like, something about dirt and this idea that dirt is basically something in the wrong place, which is such a kind of, to me, seemed like a massive revelation. I was like, oh my God, yeah, of course. Like, you know, the food on the plate is just food, it's fine. But kind of take that off of the plate and put it on the shirt or on the floor or on the table, and it kind of becomes something else immediately just by it shifting and kind of changing its relation with other things. So in that way, it's kind of interesting, that idea of like the irritation or whatever. But the reason why it's green is because, you know, if you look into the history of green, basically it's green because I think there are 7 different types of color or
reflective.
Yeah.
State that is like different gradations of reflectivity.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a limitation in terms of what you can choose from, you know, the kind of like palette that's available. And the greens seemed to make sense, like it seemed like it was going to work. We tried like a lot of different like orientations. This is Vic, by the way, who's as much a part of the kind of gestation of this show as I am, and you know, well, more so than than many people. But if you could see our kind of email chains and kind of all of the sort of choices and decision making that's been going on, it's pretty, yeah, so thanks, Vic. So, you know, I think, sorry, it's kind of like focus back in. I think throughout the different works and the way that they're kind of, they're organized and what you're sort of standing inside of, it's a mixture of lots of kind of precise thinking and kind of like idea generation, but then also there's a kind of embrace of chaos and an embrace of kind of intuition as well, which seems really important, because in the end you're in front of a thing in the kind of chaotic noise of the world or something, and it doesn't run away from that, but tries to kind of tries to kind of find a way to kind of have a relationship with that complexity of how we encounter things or whatever, you know. But it's really interesting the way that you describe it as being, you know, that one of them was different from how it should be, which is really cool. It's like, it's very interesting to me. I've just never thought about it in that particular way.
Yeah, I guess it's like you said, there's codified methods of understanding the world, and then when you make one slight variation, it makes you question perception.
Yeah, it's funny because, it's funny you should point out that particular work as well, because on the way here, I just left my flat and I was walking down the street and I saw an ambulance with this kind of pattern on the back, and I was like, oh my God, it's like it sort of appeared. It looked, because it's something I've noticed, obviously sort of like noticed a lot, and I've been like, oh my God, it's kind of like been there in the kind of toolbox of things to kind of maybe, you know, accelerate or put into motion inside of a kind of, you know, situation like this or whatever. But I think that was one of the first times since making that work and just kind of like being out in the world. And I suppose it was in my head as well, because I was coming here, you know, and it just seemed strange, you know, it seemed strange. And I was thinking about this thing very much as this kind of like moving, you know, these, all these kind of like moving formalist abstractions, you know, kind of around the city.
It's like, you know, European ambulances, like they have that kind of really pleasant siren. That it's like you can kind of like handle it. Like UK ambulances, they just shriek. So
Necessary.
It just ends conversation. And yes, it's like you immediately know it's a siren, but somehow you can kind of accept it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, another thing about sirens, I suppose, is that, you know, there's the Doppler effect thing. So you know, what the perceived pitch of that tone shifts as the kind of object moves. And I think there's something in that too, in the sense of a lack of kind of constancy in something so constant and so specific and so precise in its kind of in its like function or whatever. But even within this, there's this kind of like oscillation and kind of ambiguity as to what it is. It's hard to kind of fix it or something.
I find interesting that, you know, in this room, there's, you know, the wall is, you know, the sunset, kind of abstraction of the natural phenomenon. In the next room, there's the moon, in a similar kind of position over the sea, which is basically, you know, kind of a representation of the natural vision that we've probably all seen, I guess. But then, again, going back to those high-vis colours, in the same way with that neon pizza that's next to you, know, colours that are not present in nature, you know, they're human, almost designed by humans. Colours in terms of like a scale of tones, if you look at what in nature has that high-vis green or that high-vis orange. Whether it's, you know, I mean, perhaps, you know, fluorescent creatures at the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, I suppose, kind of it connects very sharply to what you were saying as well, about, you know, the moments in nature when these things appear, those kind of crazy colours or whatever. are often it's some kind of warning, isn't it? You know there's something wrong when you see that frog that's kind of, that sort of red frog or whatever it might be. Interestingly, thinking about that, do you know that thing about blue, about the colour blue, and it's kind of how late it is to kind of come into language. Like if you read like Greek, old sort of like those Greek tales. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
The description of the colour blue.
Yeah, there's no description, there's no blue in any of these things. It's like people describe, like the most common example is people describe like, the sort of wine red sea and things like that. And often actually reflectivity is kind of described in terms of colour and things like that, because there isn't the word for it. But it's really strange that blue is like a very late developed like kind of linguistic like innovation or whatever, just as a kind of idea. And I think there's something in that as well, I suppose, in the sense that, when something doesn't have a name, it's hard to point to it. I was thinking about this loads recently, actually. Like, there are some things that we don't, that are hard to describe. So like, love, or kind of, I don't know, death, getting very classical kind of themes, But these things that we turn to art and poetry and things to kind of to find out about and to explore. But we actually find quite difficult to articulate. These things are actually very common kind of part of everyday life in some way. And I was thinking about that recently and just wondering like what that's all about. Why is it that there are these things that are kind of, sort of foggy, these spaces where it's just kind of hard to define, precisely and to share those things between each other. I don't know what you think. I was thinking, there could be something in, to kind of give another example, like and these are classic examples. There's this kind of a group of people who live in the rainforest, and they have this kind of incredibly large library of words for the colour green. It's so defined. So what so you would be, which is weird. I wasn't thinking how it relates to this, but it's green, yeah. So you could show one of us a grid of greens, and we would just see they're basically the same. Like these are just green. But this group of people that can very precisely see and discern differences between these different shades that are completely obscure to us. We can't see it because we don't have the words to even kind of like box these things or define them. And the reason that they have such a kind of a finely tuned kind of set of words or kind of indexes for this phenomena, for the green, is because of their environment and how important it is to kind of everyday life to actually see and kind of be able to speak about these differences.
But you feel that's like, could be like almost like an evolutionary thing in the sense of biological, in terms of the color in the eye, if you're surrounded by infinite shades of green, becomes more precise to kind of distinguish certain plant from another. This is a poisonous plant, this is, this is a plant, this is a food plant, etc.
Yeah, I really like that idea actually. I don't know. I don't have an answer.
In the sense that like in the northern hemisphere, the Inuit communities have 300 and something words to describe shades of what we would consider white.
Yeah, the snow, yeah.
Or grey. That's as far as we go.
Exactly, yeah.
They have 300 and however many.
Yeah, I don't know about the argument for kind of biological roots to that, but there's a sense in the kind of neurological aspects and the social aspects in that if there are things that don't appear in language frequently, then they, by definition, would be kind of more fuzzy. We just don't go there. And I was wondering if there were just things that we just don't talk about enough, Like, is that the reason why we don't, we kind of, when we talk about love, it becomes very poetic, or death is this kind of like strange zone where we don't have kind of adequate language to describe, and is that just because we don't talk about those things enough? We just don't look at them. So there's just this kind of space that is not shared. It's not something that kind of, whereas you know, there are a lot of words for, you know, how things taste, for example, or, you know, we've got that down. So yeah, that's kind of interesting to me, actually. These kind of spaces where, you know, maybe language breaks down in some way, and we can kind of start to see and kind of think about the frameworks that we kind of operate within, you know, individually and sort of as groups and, you know, whatever it might be. So yeah, I love that. I love that. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to say or ask or talk about?
What's with the White Album in terms of the way it's come? So is that intentionally an irritant? Is that kind of like, you know, or, you know, because it's all off. Is that on purpose? So presumably, you know.
It wasn't off. It wasn't off. It wasn't off. Yeah, don't let David hear you say that, because the absolute master of hanging.
Sorry.
Okay. You know, yeah, so exactly, you said that, yeah, exactly. Matt's nailed it, yeah, entropy in action.
Okay, I'll skip that.
But I like it, no, but I like it though. So, I mean, I think there's, again, it's not something to kind of ignore. I think that, you know, something that kind of appears and reappears and changes shape in lots of the different gestures here is, you know, accumulations of things, grids, clusters, and again, it's kind of the sort of, sometimes by kind of grouping things together, you create a kind of distortion, like almost kind of hallucinogenic, like reappearance of something that's very familiar. And it can be that kind of organizing is a kind of an agent of kind of distortion or destruction or something like this. So when the grid itself starts to fail, you know, even though this is unintentional, grid failure is absolutely, you know, really precisely observed, I think, and kind of let's go for intentional. Let's go for intentional for now. But certainly throughout, you know, you know, the different things, I think there is this kind of, you're quite right to pick up on that. And this is precisely the point as well, because again, you know, if you kind of set up a situation, it's so weird, anyway, but if you have to, I just realised I'm talking to you guys, I don't know, it's weird. It's really weird. But if you set up a situation where there aren't clear pointers as to what is important or what is legible, or, you know, what is a decision and what's chance and all of these kinds of things, if that's a very kind of clearly affirmed thing, then there's a chance that that becomes a kind of gift, in the sense that you're invited to look and for what you see to be kind of important, to be defined by yourself in some way. So again, it's precisely those kind of slippages. And to me also, I think it's, you know, one of the most important parts of interacting with work in a kind of gallery context or whatever is what happens when you leave. You know, it's like what kind of remains. And again, that word kind of irritants or things that kind of don't quite sit right or whatever. You know, it's that same thing. And what echoes and what kind of just, you know, sticks with you a little bit. And I think it's that thing of like not, you know, out of placeness or not quite right. I don't know if you've ever seen like a car accident, for example, or something you've never seen. You know, you're just kind of walking around, you know, your everyday life, and then something kind of, there's an event or an object or whatever that kind of, you know, comes into your field of view, and you can't see it for a second. I don't know if you've had this experience where you just can't, it's like, you can't, there's a moment where you're aware that you can't really properly map this thing that's happening to you. And it's such a weird experience. I mean, I suppose it's similar to kind of, you know, being when you're hearing people speak another language or something, or you can't tell what the language is. And it fades and you realize, oh my God, I know this language or whatever, but there's this moment where it kind of oscillates and just hovers between kind of being like legible and being kind of noise or just completely abstract. And yeah, I think in that kind of like really strange zone, it's almost like you're really seeing, because you're kind of faced with something that you don't have a kind of a framework for already, and you're perceiving yourself perceiving. And again, I think that's something that's really, really central to a lot of the things that I'm kind of interested in trying to enact or kind of like make happen. You know, this kind of state of being aware of oneself as a kind of perceiving body, and what you do with that. You know, how does, you know, what does that? It's like, so what? But it's like, well, what does that do? And how does that kind of echo and remain, and maybe kind of function as like a tool of some kind that could be drawn upon, you know, later down the line. Yeah.
Speaking of tools, that image there is really interesting, that visual.
Which image?
Okay. It looks like kind of like a European masterwork.
Oh, okay.
But maybe one that's been fed through a kind of machine learning program. And I've heard just from the didactics that there were some pieces in here where you collaborated with AIs. And so I'm really curious about that process and what that was like for you.
So there's with those particular works, there's a series that's, is it 2018? 20, yeah. So yeah, it started in 2018.
Depends whether you, when it was conceived or fabricated, or maybe in 2021.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Like the idea and the image was conceived earlier, but
yeah. Exactly. So yeah, it was then when I kind of started exploring this system or kind of process for kind of working with these old master paintings, and I found a way to kind of, you know, there are these systems that these kind of like AI systems that you can use to kind of basically. You know, you might have a photo of your dog and you want it to look like sunflowers by Van Gogh or something, you know? So you kind of feed it these different indices, and then it will, you know, spit out this image of your dog looking like it was painted by Van Gogh, right? Or it looks like sunflowers. And I found a way of I found a particular system and a way of hacking it to create these images that don't really resolve. So these images that look like, I mean, it's weird describing something that's there, but I will. But you know, but these images that kind of have a sort of a materiality that just is in a kind of permanent state of collapse or a formation, so that the closer you look at them, they kind of resist fixity. So, you know, the more you look, you realize that the kind of component parts look like pieces of meat or like undulating fabric or something like this, you know. It's really like very strange. And also there's a scale thing in the sense that is there a figure? Is it like a tiny figure, or is it like a group of people or a table or whatever? So, you know, so system-wise, that's how I sort of started making those works. And yeah, I mean, the intention is that they kind of become these kind of irresolute forms in some way.
And is that something that you were kind of setting out to explore? Or was that, were you just kind of open to, I guess, like, how determined was it?
Oh, like very... Hello, someone just censored, yeah. Just so you have how's it going? So, yeah, no, intentionally, yeah. Intentionally. But as usual, though, it being something that, in practical terms, was about a lot of testing. A lot of testing to find a way to do this. Like, I knew it could be done, and there was like a way that I found to kind of do it. But yeah, it's strange. So yeah, a mixture of kind of intention and sort of chance, chaos.
Was it a process that you like at one point, like you froze the machine and you're like, this is the image?
No, it's not like that.
Continue developing?
No, it's not. No, it's not like that. It's not like that. It's not like a GAN thing. It's not like a generative adversarial network. It's kind of a different kind of system. I think this is the kind of complicated thing with machine learning, because it's such a dark art in some way, but also very simple in lots of ways. But there are lots of different things that we're using similar terms for. Correctly, not correcting anyone, correctly, but it's just it's like talking about painting. It's like there's
nothing about machine learning.
Very few people do. I mean, I think that's one of the interesting things about it. It's like that there are things that happen that sort of algorithmic models are kind of doing, but no one really knows why they're doing that, which is really fascinating to me. So I think that the existence of this kind of space to work with and kind of look at and think about is it's huge to me. And it seems like there are forms of image making and forms of image and forms of kind of like visual and just perceptual experience derived from such image objects that will become like quite a core part of the everyday, I think, very soon. So yeah, it's interesting to me for that reason. But in the end, it's kind of like it's a very old school kind of thing. It's like a pointillist thing, or cubist thing, or like Dali or whatever. Like the kind of functioning of that is like very, very trad in lots of ways. As is a lot of the work and a lot of what I'm trying to do. I think using kind of systems and forms that I mean, it's a bit like earlier on when we were talking about like love and death and stuff like that. It's like you could pick up Shakespeare, or you could turn on the radio, or you could talk to your friend, and it's all there. So I think it's just about kind of like, well, I'm interested in kind of tuning into those kind of streams of thought and trying to tease something out that that can appear, right? That doesn't fall back into what we think we already know. Yeah.
I've got a really basic question.
You can't have two. You can't have two questions. You can't have two questions. No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking.
Part B after that.
Yeah, all right.
What's with the Mitsubishi? Is that your old car, or did you used to drive that model?
Or do you even have a license?
All good questions. All good questions. So I like the tone of your questions. It's perfect. It's so good. They're all the tone of everyone's questions is perfect. So, what does it mean to you? What does it mean to you? The fact that it's the brand of the car, is that important to you?
It's nostalgic.
Yeah.
In a way, and the fact that there's like a Rush sticker on it, and there is a certain and the mushrooms, there's kind of like a nostalgia involved in it, in which probably smoke joints and it's nice, at some point in my life.
Right. Right.
Not in the last 5 years.
No, they were buying Mitsubishis because of the film connotation, and then they're buying the cars, and then
Yeah, so there's a lot.
That's what I'm thinking. Is it something to do with that?
Well, it's something to do with lots of things, And I think again, the point is not that there's a code, a singular code to be cracked, or a kind of an answer, but there are certainly answers, that you're providing, and contexts that you're kind of providing that are invited by an interaction with the thing, and that's what's with it. That would be the answer. What's with it is exactly that. Is that interaction that you're starting to have with it, without my.
You were saying before about those moments where like it pulls you out of the everyday, in a sense, when you spoke about the car accident, for example.
Yeah.
You're were saying that, and I was like, oh shit, it's like the back part of a car that probably wasn't an accident at some point, you know, and it's been taken out of the junkyard or whatever. Who knows what happened to that car initially, or what that car carried within it.
Yeah, I mean, I think as soon as you start kind of messing around with things, objects, then history becomes a presence, I think. But one of the things that I like about those, that, you know, and the other one in the other room is like the idea of speed and slowness, and things being kind of, you know, yeah, frozen. And the idea of like the back of a car is something that either you see in total stasis, you know, it's like the most awful thing if you're in a traffic jam on the M25 or something, and that's all you're seeing is like this, or moving away from you at pace, you know. And I think there's something about speed that I find interesting about those objects, and also the collisions that are brought about with the other, you know, the kind of manipulations of them with the butterflies and with the stickers and so on, reflections, you know, the rest of the room. So I'm really interested in the idea of speed, acceleration, freezing, you know, those kinds of things. And of course, yeah, again, those very kind of like personal forms of kind of understanding that we bring to them, you know? Yeah. You were going to ask something.
Do you approach the works in this gallery similar to how you approach your other mediums of art, such as your music? Is it a different kind of process?
It's a really interesting question, because I'm trying to think, how do I approach?
I've got a question that I think would add slightly to that, which is this a sequence of events, or is this like a lot of things taken from like a kind of a storyboard of ideas instantaneously in a way? I don't know, maybe you think it doesn't, but does one thing lead to another, or does it kind of be drawn in all at once, like Google image search?
Is that the same question?
Is it the same question? It's maybe not.
Because I'm happy to, just to check.
That's up to you, I think. Yeah.
But I was thinking of music as well. I guess it makes sense if someone knows your music, that it's also like that kind of.
I mean, do you see? Do you see some? I mean, I'm not evading it, but do you see some parallels between the things as they come to you that would suggest some crossovers in terms of process?
Yeah, I mean, it seems more like a sort of coming together of various different ideas. A lot of other artists that I might listen to, it's very sort of almost consistent, but not in a good or a bad way. But I think it's more a collection of concepts and ideas that I can see in this gallery and maybe in music as well.
Right, I love that. Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, because I guess again, it's like the idea of a framework or a kind of a holding pattern, you know, that things can kind of happen within, you know, but also the idea, being able to see the kind of seams almost, you know, and maybe avoiding a kind of a seamlessness or the idea of the complete thing or full sort of resolution is really important to me. Yeah, it's like a really kind of massive part. So I think in that sense, absolutely, it's very, very connected. And process-wise, similarly, you know, kind of going back, you know, full circle in a way as well. There's always a kind of a kind of sort of delicate kind of balance between, you know, total chaos and sort of, you know, precision or something. And I hope that's kind of, I hope it feels like that too. I hope it does feel like that. But I think your description was really resonated with me. So, thanks. Does that answer it kind of? Yeah. And then you were saying about.
Sorry, it made sense in my head.
no, but it made total sense. But I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't skipping a question, just to.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking, is it well, like I said, is it a sequence of events? Like, does one idea lead to another, to another, to another? Or is it like, I mean, to my mind, this kind of feels to me like a little bit like, like a Google image search in reality. So you like an image search for SCHEMA or Damien Roach or something, and something just like pops up, and it's like, you've got like, even like image search, shopping search, travel search.
It's like a rabbit hole that you keep you fall in.
Yeah.
Like, it kind of feels to me like everything happened instantaneously, and of course that's not true. But yeah, sequence or. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, sorry, no, I'm just really into what people are saying. So if I look like blank, that's just my face. But basically, like, I'm just joking. But yeah, I think that's really spot on as well. I mean, what's hard to tell is what's sort of, what's there in terms of organization and that kind of structure and the kind of the logic that seems to be present. What's actually there and what is being, what's being imposed upon that by somebody kind of coming into the situation. It's really hard to tell where the intention and the kind of eventual manifestation of some kind of series of logics or forms comes about, and it's really hard to tell like where that line is. What did I see? I saw a photo that someone had taken in here the other day, and there was just something I hadn't seen before in terms of, osmosis between different elements of the installation. And so that was definitely eye-opening to me, having had a really kind of intimate relationship with the space and all the individual works and everything. So again, without repeating, I feel like I'm semi-doing, which is not good. But I think that the intention is definitely to kind of create a situation comprised of separate interlocking gestures that could potentially have the openness and simultaneous sort of specificity to kind of elicit this kind of response that you're describing, this feeling of connectivity and of a kind of a speed as well, because you say it's like this thing of it feels like everything just happened all at once, and I think it is a bit like that, like a freeze frame or something, or like weirdly something like absolutely static and also really oscillating, like kind of just about to do something else or whatever. Yeah, so it's hard to say, isn't it? What's in the work and what's kind of in your head, in our heads, walking into it.
Yeah. It's not a gigantic leap to imagine that followed by that, 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 followed by that.
See, I love this.
It's just not, is it? I mean, you could imagine like a kind of an intellectual step that takes you from here to here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from here to here to here, those seem to be completely connected.
That's really interesting. So you see it as like because there's an element of your point which is about sequencing, really.
Yeah.
And I think that what you've just done is like really beautiful and sort of fascinating. And I think that there's definitely like an intentionality in the kind of there's both repetition within individual works, but then also in the kind of the structures that they're made of, and just certain like kind of archetypal forms and so on that kind of give that like flexibility to the parts, you know? So there's a design, it's like by design, but then I wouldn't, like what you've just drawn out, this kind of map, is not a map that I have produced for people to kind of find this particular route or whatever, you know, it's non-linear, it's absolutely non-linear in that sense.
It seems as if it's sort of they're ungrounded signifiers and they're sort of occurring at different times, but simultaneously.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with that, actually. I would definitely agree with that. I think also that's, yeah, the idea of ungrounded or kind of something hovering, I think is, again, like super present. And that's something I think the wallpaper and the kind of the site that all of this is located in, which is basically an impossible place as well. You know, it's like we're on, like where is this? You know, it's like there's like 4 suns and are we on an island, or like, you know, are we in the middle of the sea, or what's going on? You know, it's like this impossible place. But the thing is also, yeah, there's this kind of immediately, you know, like when you're in a plane and you look out the window and you can't tell how big anything is. Like you just can't. You can see a cloud, and it's hard to imagine if you took like a, you know, double-decker bus or whatever it might be. Where would it be? Like, how big is stuff? You know, you can't tell. All of your kind of landmarks for kind of understanding.
Temporalities are the things that's allowing it to open, because the different interpretations there, the oscillation, as you're saying, because there's a number of different interpretations, isn't there? And we're clearly quite joyful about that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Because I think it seems very important. I mean, again, like the only reason for any of this stuff is for those kinds of experiences in other people's minds to take place. And it seems like there's like a huge import to retaining and kind of training in a way, like our ability to see outside of the frameworks that we're used to seeing from within. You know, we need to, you know, as on lots of different levels, that seems to be of primary importance, you know. And so so yeah, that's like a huge thing for me. The import of kind of creative thinking, and I don't mean creative thinking as in, you know, throwing paint at stuff or whatever. I just mean, you know, just really being faced with a set of circumstances and trying to think, well, what could be done, you know, outside of what's being done or what has been done. And yeah, that's of primary importance to me, just like as a person. And it's a big kind of motivator behind, you know, trying to kind of make these sorts of situations happen, because it's about that. It's about that for other people, and about that, you know, us, you know, kind of community, kind of training that ability to try and construct different ways of thinking.
Well, you all have adversarial networks, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly, you know. Thank you so much. Is there anything else anyone wanted to ask or say, or anything?
I like this thing about returning to car accidents, about this like moment of not being able to plan it. I kind of witnessed an accident last weekend, and I experienced that moment where it's like it doesn't cohere, and then slowly you kind of react.
It's a really odd experience, isn't it?
And there's an Emily Dickinson poem that starts pain as an element of blank, which is this kind of like meditative, as I understand it, kind of utter nowness. But you've got Emily Dickinson next door. So you've trained an AI on Emily Dickinson?
So I didn't train it though. Yeah. I didn't train that. So I've used an AI that's been trained on Emily Dickinson's work to create a poem, like a kind of 100-line poem, that's nudged. I mean, it's like hard to explain how this stuff works, but that same poem would never be recreated. And if you were sort of holding the hand of that system through the process of making it, you would make completely different decisions to the ones that I made to make that thing. But yeah, using an AI trained on Emily Dickinson's work, I created this long poem that is circular. It's irresolute. You know, it never resolves, but it kind of always gives this the kind of sense of coming to resolution, or kind of like quite precise and quite evocative imagery and kind of ideas, but it never quite finishes, and it kind of just tumbles over itself. The way that it's being shown in this video is like a bit more linear. You know, the way it's being presented here, because of time and because of the logic of the way people might visit this situation, the circularity of it isn't being exploited to the fullest. You know, it's not important really in this situation. But as I'm telling you about it now, it's like the poem itself is a circular thing. So you could kind of enter into it at any point, and it will just kind of hover, again, to use that word, or, you know, the experience that you started this with, that you had with this horrible event that you witnessed, just kind of distended, you know, that kind of moment of almost resolution kind of just distended like infinitely, really. And I thought her work was really interesting because of, you know, who she was, her relationship with the outside world, or kind of lack of, you know, or very particular relationship with the outside world, but then also structurally, you know, the way that both form and content was kind of mined in the production of her work in a very unique and kind of mysterious way, actually, as well. Like, you know, impossible to actually unpick. There was loads of work that was destroyed as well, like by family members after her death, like loads of letters and. Yeah, it's really interesting, but I, you know, yeah, yeah.
So it's not GPT-3.
GPT-3.
Sorry, that's a question. It's just a language model.
Let's see.
Oh, I see.
Network.
No.
But that's trained separately. And it's not trained to make her poetry.
Yeah. Yeah, it is trained on her poetry.
GPT-3 is not, though.
Oh, I see, sorry.
I wonder if it was simple
Oh, okay.
technology.
Right. Yeah. No, it's... I had this the other day because I was talking to somebody, and like I was just talking to someone in messages, and they said they were talking about how they were talking about like a place, and they said that's where oh God, I can't remember now. PSG is from. Does PSG mean anything to anybody here? PSG. Was it PSG?
Football team.
There you go, yeah. The famous football team, apparently. I'd never heard. I was like, oh my God, I was like, what's PSG? And they're like, oh, you know, it's common knowledge, apparently, but I had no idea about that. So this reminds me of that moment, you know, just kind of acronym. I'm like, I don't know what that is, but yeah, that's,
It's a
hopefully answers there.
network that can answer questions
Right,
in a very believable kind of way,
yeah.
but also very slippery.
Are they accurate?
Yeah, sorry, I'm aware that I'm on camera. I don't.
You just realised.
They too much for it's like really geeky details.
No, it's good. I mean, you're in good company. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. GPT-3, it's just a neural network that is trained on loads of like replies to questions, and it does this really interesting thing. But it's this really exasperating thing as well, because it always kind of evades meaning, but also it's like says these really profound things, but then instantly kind of undermine themselves
Yeah.
in the same sentence.
Yeah. I do that a lot. Yeah, it's like Very good. He left that for somebody. Yeah, somebody had to do it. Somebody had to do that. Again, was there anything else anyone wanted to say or ask? Doesn't have to be positive as well, actually. Just saying. You could be like really angry about something.
Just real quick. So the word hover has come up a couple of times, and the hummingbird, which I think is my favourite piece in the whole exhibition. Yeah, just wanted to say that. I really like it. And then that up there.
Oh yeah.
So we're talking about all these sort of, technology-driven generated situations. And then it was one of the first things I clocked when I walked in at the opening, and I was like,
yeah, I mean, there's something about the graffiti, the tag. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, isn't there? There's a lot there. But I think there is something. There's a lot that's really interesting to me about the way that different people use spaces, use cities and everything, and I feel like, the kind of technology of like graffiti or like skateboarding or something like that, but the technology of those kinds of forms that kind of, basically see the structure of the city and different forms of languages, like be they languages of the body or whatever, or an interaction with space. Really, really, I think there's a lot that we can kind of like draw from those kinds of systems of thinking. There's nothing more kind of revealing, I suppose, to the existence of very different ways of thinking about the same thing as, the angry security guard and the skater who just sees like perfect rail or whatever, and properties of like an architectural thing that are completely invisible to so many people. But anyway, I think, with kind of tagging, which is obviously a different thing, I think again, similarly, it's like, the city, or space, becoming something else. And also, there's something, isn't there, about kind of, we were talking before about language and about naming things, and what happens when you kind of leave a trace on something. Does the wall that's been written on by somebody, is it there? Does it become theirs? They kind of claim this thing. So there are all of these. I suppose one of the things is that strategy has kind of been brought into this space, but of course it's something that is just as interesting out there in the world. But it's just maybe a moment to kind of think about it and kind of consider it amongst these other kinds of ideas. Yeah.
But you give, the word itself, it could be like E1 or something, like as a tag. The fact that you're using the word real in this, with everything we've spoken about, or kind of thought about today and what you thought about during the process. It's a strong word in terms of like.
It's a strong word, isn't it?
To AI situation, but is it all?
Well, it's a funny one, isn't it?
Maybe they would go down crazy kind of philosophical.
Well, it's all that's all up for grabs. It's all up for grabs. It's very clearly not real. It's not real when it is also one of the most real things in the whole space. Because it reveals itself. The kind of.
What is like tape?
It's paper. It's paper.
It's not real because it's not marker on the wall.
But is it not? Is it not real? Is it not real? Because is it not real? But this is exactly the point. There's no answer to that. Which is precisely.
I just love that you use that word. Like I walked in, I was like, all right, okay.
Set the tone. Yeah. Anything else? The kitchen / stairs crew. Did you have it? Don't be shy. Is there anything you wanted to say or ask? There's no good or bad or right or wrong.
How long did it take you to collect all of these items?
That's a really good question, actually.
You mean the ideas or the actual?
Yeah, this is
the real items.
this is the thing, yeah, because there's lots of different times. I think, you know, some of the ideas have been around for a long time. So the way that one kind of cool thing about how I tend to make work is I don't have a kind of traditional. I don't know if there is such a thing, but you know, I don't. There's no studio that I go to every day to kind of make things and kind of, you know, that's not really the way that I work. Like I work a lot in like a collector of ideas, sort of as they happen, and sometimes.
Hunter-gatherer.
So yeah, exactly, yeah. Sometimes it's like the material quality of something, like the color of something, or like the abstraction, the sort of found formalist abstraction of like the back of an ambulance, or a phrase, or you know, whatever it might be, you know, or a way of arranging things. So I kind of collect it, and I have like lists and lists of like things, and then, you know, when it came to kind of constructing this show, it was kind of a combination of like consulting the list and sort of seeing what was there to be used, but then also, I guess, you know, in one of the things that came up earlier was this idea of kind of sequential, you know, one thing leading to another or whatever. And I think, you know, very quickly, once a kind of a certain framework was set, then lots of these kind of very disparate things just kind of started to, you know, there was a logic, I suppose, in like what seemed to make sense to kind of to exist in here. Anyway, realizing I'm not answering your question at all, there are lots of different times. So there are some things that happened very like much in the space, you know, didn't exist like entirely before being in here and hanging the show. There are some things that were like very, you know, working in response to the situation that was being set up as it kind of unfolded. And then other things which are kind of much slower in terms of the production, in terms of the gestation of the ideas. So it's really like a kind of, you know, it really does have a lot of those qualities that were being described by a couple of people in the sense of something just kind of like frozen. I would be interested to, Vic, cover your ears, but I would be interested to kind of like do another, you know, I mean, not actually do it, but like Vic's like, no, please, please no, just go away. Just please go away for a while. But it'd be interesting to know if there is another solution to like how to do this show. You know, I wonder, I feel like, I don't know, I mean, how many people are artists here? That was a non-committal, yeah, really non-committal. This is just for the people at home. The hand.
That's not real, right?
The hands go up very briefly, just like this. It's so weird. You can't see this, but that's what's happening out here. So there are a few artists, covert artists, lots of artists in here, and I think it's quite odd, that thing when you're hanging a show or whatever, and the idea of like rightness. And it can seem so clear, which is uncanny, you know, just like this with that, or this at this angle, or whatever, and everyone's just like, yes, this is the way it should be. And I guess we could go into a massive one about that, like what's behind that, but, you know, so yeah, there are lots of different times and lots of different sorts of paces coexistent. So I couldn't actually put like a start date on it, though. I actually really couldn't. I couldn't put an actual start date on it. But certainly there are things that some ideas have like sort of encrusted with like years of existence, and other things weeks, you know, and it's all here together.
And then other things keep transforming.
Yeah, exactly, like the, yeah, like the grid.
Gravity is real.
Gravity is real, precisely. Yeah.
I liked earlier when you said that you had to kind of like hold the AI's hand through the making process.
Of the poem.
I've kind of just been sitting here thinking about you and like an AI, Emily Dickinson holding hands. Nice thought to sit with.
Yeah. I mean, unless anyone has anything else to say, is that a good, or, I don't know actually, I mean, I'm easy, we can, I don't know, we can carry on, but I quite like that.
What percentage logic, what percentage poetry for the whole show?
Is that, what's this now?
I want a percentage breakdown, logic versus poetry.
It's changeable.
It's in flux.
Yeah, exactly, in flux. All right.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. So kind. So kind. Really appreciate it. It's great.